Non-stop Vikings talk. It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
All right, Purple Daily on draft every Monday right here on the Purple Daily YouTube channel. Miles Gorham, Tyler Fornes, Declan Goff here to break things down from a Vikings perspective on an NFL draft point of view. Whether we go 52 weeks a year, we do go every Monday right here. We take the NFL draft, we kind of morphed into a season-long show here on Purple Daily. We just want to see the Vikings win a Super Bowl before we die, and maybe a new tagline of finding our next quarterback, which we're going to get into here on Purple Daily on draft. Vikings have the 49ers on Monday Night Football. So we're recording that morning before that game takes place. So we're going to keep this a little bit more broad. We're going to talk quarterback options for the draft for the Vikings in this episode. Mostly got some feedback questions I'm excited to get into and ask Tyler and Miles about as well. And of course, you can always shoot us notes, whether it's in the YouTube comment section or there's a feedback option too on the Score North app where I get a lot of those questions for this show. So if whether options, whatever works for you, if you want to hear us talk about anyone specifically, quarterback or non-quarterback, we'll gladly do it here on Purple Daily on draft. So let's start here. So we obviously know Caleb Williams, Drake Maye are, at least for now, probably the top two quarterback options on the board if the draft were to take place tomorrow. What about the options behind them? So if the Vikings are obviously outside of those top, 3 picks, 4 picks in the draft or so, and they're outside of getting Drake Maye or Caleb Williams, who would be, for you, Forno, the first quarterback that you would look to take if you were the Vikings? And I'll give you more of a scenario of the Vikings are picking anywhere between, let's call it 8th and 13th. Let's keep it in that. Maybe if you guys want to widen that out or go in a different direction, go for it. But let's say they're picking between 8th and 13th. Maye and Williams are off the board. Who would the Vikings be looking at if they're trying to find their next quarterback?
Fun random fact, the Eagles went from 13th to 8th by sending Byron Maxwell and DeMarco Murray. No, it was Byron Maxwell and Kiko Alonso to the Dolphins so they could jump up there. Just a fun fact for the day because I know way too much about a lot of random stuff. But going into the season, I had Quinn Ewers at 3, and it wasn't based on what he necessarily had done. It was about what his potential was and how he could be able to kind of take that next step. He was a consensus 5-star recruit, and he was, I believe, like one of the top 6 recruits of all time. And I think that data goes back to about 1999 when they really started tracking the stuff with like Rivals 24/7. Now you have On3, you have ESPN, and he was a consensus number 1 overall recruit. And they called him Mullet Mahomes because of what he was able to do and create outside of structure, throw with unique arm angles. Plus, he had just a wicked sick mullet. He shaved that off before the season. But the biggest thing with Ewers was always, can he stay consistent? Can he like link throws together? Can he create a chain? Like that's one of the biggest issues we've seen with Kirk Cousins, where he'll just go off for like 3 quarters. And then all of a sudden he'll forget how to attack downfield and he'll just check it down. And that's kind of the big thing with Ewers right now. It's inconsistency, where he'll throw it way too high and have just bad footwork with a guy wide open over the middle. He'll overshoot a deep ball by 3 yards. And it's not from lack of talent. It's just lack of fundamentals, getting your base set, and really understanding how to utilize those things to help you. Because the one thing we'll talk about with Caleb Williams here in a little bit, in structure play is still the dominant force in the National Football League. Creating outside of structure puts you over the top. But if you can't do the in structure stuff, it doesn't matter what you do outside of structure, because you still have to be able to win from the pocket. And that's something that I think Ewers is still kind of transitioning to. He's improved. And I've said it on this show before, going into the year, it was right after the Alabama game. He was like 7 of 12 on throws 20 plus yards or more against just Alabama and Oklahoma. Outside of that, he was 5 of 43. And some of that you can deal with the labrum issue in his left shoulder. Other factors, like he just needs to stay consistent. And I really like what Ewers brings to the table. But it's a situation where you'd want him to maybe sit a year and just rebuild him. He's like the $6 million man. But that's not really today's NFL anymore. If you're taking with a top 15 pick, you better be ready to play. That's the expectation of the fan base. That's going to be the pressure that's put on a head coach like Kevin O'Connell, who's a QB guy. And it's just one of those things. Like, I would rather take him in round 2, give him the Jalen Hurts treatment, and let him grow and develop. That's not today's NFL anymore. And it kind of stinks for him, but Ewers would be the guy. The other guy I know we'll talk about more is JJ McCarthy.
So Ewers obviously the AC joint injury? Is that what took place over the weekend? Shoulder injury?
Yeah, and that's the same injury that Anthony Richardson had, but Richardson had a grade 3, which is really, really bad, and that's why they decided to just go the surgery route. It's at minimum 6 to 8 week recovery, and by that point, unless the Colts are like making a legit playoff run, there's no way Richardson's coming back. AC joints can take even like a week or two to heal. It just depends on how bad the sprain is, and I'm really excited because Malik Murphy has legit talent. And he's just kind of get washed away because you have Arch Manning on the bench as well. Manning's not ready to play. He will be next year, but Murphy's going to be able to have a chance to showcase what he can do before he likely enters the transfer portal. But if it's a really bad AC joint injury, that could really spell problems for Texas.
So if it's an AC joint, maybe that becomes problems for him and his draft stock position. I guess. Miles, are you looking?
I wouldn't go draft stock position.
You wouldn't go there for now.
No. Well, it's an AC joint. It's like pulling a hamstring.
It's a short term injury. It's not like it should be anything that'll impact him down the road.
Okay.
So even if it was that grade 3 like Richardson had, where you have surgery, it's 6 to 8 weeks. He'll be fine to do all the draft season stuff.
I think that's one of the 1,000 injuries that Byron Buxton has had over the course of his career. So that's why I definitely do remember it, but I got PTSD. I think
has he had bilateral leg weakness yet? That's the one we have to be concerned with.
That's one I don't want to hear either. So how about you, Miles? So if it's maybe Ewers that's on the board, is it JJ McCarthy for you? Who else, I guess, would you be looking at if the Vikings were in this scenario?
Yeah, it is JJ McCarthy for me. I know I've talked a few weeks ago about JJ McCarthy, but just like Forno, I had McCarthy going in to the year with McCarthy as my QB3. Same reasons he kind of had Ewers. It was like I saw some potential. I think if he can build off of it and have a kind of put everything together, he could really become that guy. And I think he solidified that role as of right now. Now, I know Shedeur Sanders is a guy that we've talked about too. We'll see kind of what happens with him. We don't expect him to come out. So I think that's why I especially have McCarthy as my QB3 because I don't expect Sanders to come out. But I think McCarthy gives you everything that Forno touched on of like what you're looking for. He plays really well within the structure and within the pocket, but he also has shown his ability to maneuver and and feel the pocket and maneuver the pocket, but also make plays out of structure. Now I don't think he's like an elite athlete, but I think he's a good enough athlete to make plays in the run game and with his feet. And he has a strong enough arm and an arm talent to make those throws. There's a throw on Saturday where he his receiver or tight, I think it was a tight end running kind of like a bend route. You kind of call it like a glance route. Everybody calls it a little different things, but essentially you're just kind of trying to cross and get over top of the defender. And he gets over top. I think it was either a linebacker or a safety. And before the safety could even turn his head, before the receiver broke, the ball's already out of McCarthy's hands. And there's no way the defender could even make a play on the ball. He puts it right over his head, drops right in the bucket, touchdown. I just think those types of plays that you're looking for, those are the types of things I'm looking for in a quarterback in the draft. And I think a guy like McCarthy, who's kind of putting it all together now, but I also think there's that like connection with Kwesi. Kwesi's got a connection to Jim Harbaugh from his time in San Francisco. We know that Kwesi brought in Jim Harbaugh to Minnesota to interview for the head coaching job. Now, I'm not saying that automatically means that Kwesi's going to want to draft JJ McCarthy, or I think Kevin O'Connell is going to have a huge part in that role as well. But there's a connection there. So I think, if you have a connection to the coach, it's a lot easier for you to get even more background information on a prospect like McCarthy for Kwesi and co. than maybe other teams might be able to get. So I'm a big McCarthy fan. I think he's kind of solidified himself as my QB3 right now, and I would love to see him come out in the draft this year.
So this actually transitions to a really good question here from Troy, who sent this over. Troy says, love PDOD, look forward to it every week. Question for the show, though. What traits and characteristics do NFL scouts look for when scouting college quarterbacks to make the leap to the NFL? And what characteristics and traits should the Vikings be looking at for what fits Kevin O'Connell's play scheme? Which QBs would be the best fit? So a lot of info there, a lot of things to parse through, and hate to put some of you guys on the spot, but what are some of those characteristics, Forno, that you like to see? And then how do you dovetail that into what fits Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings scheme?
So this is a really difficult question because there is no blueprint to finding a quarterback. You have the Bill Parcells method where they have to start at least 28 games, 3-year starter, have to be at least like 6'3", and like a multi-year captain. Like there's those types of checklists. But when you look at how some of the quarterbacks that have been successful coming out of the last few drafts, there's very little that you can actually pinpoint to. They all have this in common. Like that's,
well, and the game's changed. The game's
Yeah.
changed too, and I think that's had an impact on that as well.
Yeah, and it's so difficult because like Mahomes could we'll have that conversation with Williams, struggled a little bit within structure. I mean, it was the Mike Leach air raid, but his offensive line couldn't protect him, and he was scrambling and trying to make just absolutely nuts throws all the time. There's this one where he had against Baylor that went at Texas Tech where he was scrambling out to his left and just throws across his body like 60 yards for a touchdown. Like that was what was really intriguing about him, but you knew he was a project. And Andy Reid took it on. Well, he won the MVP in his first year as a starter. Justin Herbert, attacking the football downfield is his best trait. All Mario Cristobal had him do was throw laterally and throw screens. That's not using him the best. And the second he gets in with the Chargers, they start letting him air it out downfield. It's like, all right, this is a guy. Tua is the best anticipator probably in the National Football League. He does not have the strongest arm, and he's a lefty. While it sounds really dumb, being a lefty quarterback matters. And a lot of people don't like that because everything's backwards and you're basically trying to teach somebody with the complete reverse like mechanics. So some things that I look for, but I say all that because sometimes guys just have it. Sometimes guys just don't. And it doesn't matter. Like Brock Purdy was great in 2019 in college, absolutely sucked in 20 and 21, just awful. And he went from a quarterback, oh, he may be good, to this guy shouldn't be drafted. Nobody should touch him. And now he's like, what, like 13-1 as a starter? Like it's sometimes guys just have it and it works out and situation matters. So if I'm Kevin O'Connell, here's what I'm looking for. I want somebody who can dominate within structure. I want somebody who's capable enough to create. I want somebody who has a strong arm to make some of those ridiculous throws, and somebody who is a good processor. You can become a better processor. You can't just all of a sudden have a stronger arm. And like, I think mechanics can overall be learned, especially with footwork, because you can drill that to oblivion and get that fixed. We've seen that time over time, but you can't teach some of that special stuff. You can't teach genuine arm talent. And it's hard to get somebody to be better within the confines of the pocket. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. And then stuff that we can't actually identify because we're not in the room. I want somebody who's intelligent and accepts coaching. And that is going to be completely objective and something that, unless we're hearing directly from people who are in those rooms, we can't know. And that's what, and there's a reason why so many GMs struggle to find a quarterback. Like we give Rick Spielman crap. It's hard. Like even like top 10 picks, it's like 1 out of 3. Like those are difficult odds. Like this isn't baseball. This is the NFL. And like those are some of the things I look for, but there is no prototype. Check all these boxes and this is your guy.
I feel like guys get, or at least not guys, certain fans or scouts or whatever, they get in love with, arm talent. And, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, big time arms. And Allen had a tough time adjusting. Herbert kind of stepped in right away and I think proved a lot of people wrong. And he still has some growth to do. But Josh Allen, right? Perfect example of a guy with absurd arm talent, but took like 2 years, a lot of failed starts, a lot of failed games before he became obviously the Josh Allen that we all know now. But I think arm strength to me is always the one that fans always love to hear about. Because look, you can throw a ball super far, but that honestly doesn't not necessarily mean a damn thing. If Jamarcus Russell can throw a ball on his knee 75 yards and he can't hit anything, obviously that's not going to be anything good either. Miles, were there any other characteristics that Forno maybe didn't mention that you would like to look for in a quarterback and how that fits KOC's type of coaching?
Yeah, I think one thing too is I think arm talent gets construed to being arm strength. Arm talent is also like throwing with anticipation, throwing with different arm angles, accuracy. Like there's a whole like breadth of things that go into like what arm talent means, not just arm strength. Not saying that's what you're saying just in general though. I know folks can like focus on like the like arm strength as arm talent, but like there's so much more to it than that. That's why like I think Tua has arm talent because you see the accuracy, you see the anticipation. There's a lot that goes into it, not just the fact that his arm isn't as strong as other guys, but he's also the best deep passer in the league right now. So like, and he has like arguably one of the weaker arms in the league. So there's a lot that goes into that. But I think a lot of what you look for, I think kind of what we talked about, like what the traditional, like pocket passer was like the thing for so long in the NFL. I think what we're seeing is like the shift in like what we call like the prototypical quarterback. It's you got to be a guy that's kind of a dual threat. Obviously, playing within the pocket, having accuracy is a huge part of that. But I think a guy that has escapability, maneuverability in the pocket, but also like athletic, like just like like natural athleticism. We've seen like Lamar Jackson's kind of an outlier in like the athleticism aspect of it. But like you see guys like Josh Allen, you see guys like Justin Herbert. Those guys have athleticism. They may not like I think Allen's kind of probably closer to like the higher end athlete, but like Justin Herbert's a good athlete, but he's not like an amazing athlete or anything, but he's a functional good athlete that like can maneuver the pocket, run away from guys, use his legs to get first downs. Like those are the types of things I think you kind of want to have a little bit of both of. Like you don't want just a true pocket passer, but you also don't want a guy that not to dog on Justin Fields, but like coming out, I thought he was going to be a better passer, than he's kind of shown in the NFL. But like you want more than a guy that's just good with his feet. You want guys that kind of have a little bit of both that you can mold into like kind of being a pocket passer. Usually comes first, but I think for KOC, the one thing that I'm excited about whenever they do make that move to go get their quarterback, the young quarterback, is he seems like the type that's willing to adjust his offense to what his skill set of the guy he has. And so I think if he goes and gets a Caleb Williams, Drake Maye, JJ McCarthy, these guys coming out in the draft, I think he's going to adjust his offense to make sure that's not just about the guys fitting his scheme, but also his scheme fitting those guys' skill sets and traits and their abilities. And I think that's one thing not all coaches are willing to do. I don't think we see guys like Josh McDaniels. I think he struggled with that, especially whenever he leaves New England, he seems to kind of like hyper focus on like what his quarterback has to be rather than like adjusting around him. But like Kyle Shanahan is obviously the ideal scenario there of like, he's like the one like outlier of like his guys need to fit his scheme because of like what he needs from his quarterback to be successful. Like that's why maybe Trey Lance wasn't as much of a fit as we'd like him to be. But at the same time, I think you see other teams where they really like to focus on building their offense around their quarterback and not just about around their scheme, but their quarterback being that centerpiece. And I think Kevin O'Connell at least has shown that he's the type of guy that wants to build around his best players, not just have them build into what he's trying to do best.
And then Forno, you were talking to us earlier this week, and you've done this a few times on the show, but Caleb Williams is at least labeled as this can't miss generational prospect. Maybe not as high as Trevor Lawrence coming out or even Andrew Luck coming out, but obviously a can't miss quarterback. And I think a lot of fans just see that on paper and they think, all right, he's the next big thing. He'll be the next stud quarterback that enters the NFL. But you see a lot more warts in his game that maybe don't get discussed enough with other fans or other media and scouts. So I guess Caleb Williams, who probably is going number one, but what do you not specifically like about Caleb Williams' games, or what can Caleb Williams be better at to really solidify himself as a can't miss prospect?
I don't think he's a can't miss prospect, at least on the level of a Trevor Lawrence and Andrew Luck. I don't think he's close to those guys. And when I watch Caleb Williams, and I don't mean this as an insult, it's almost like he's playing street ball, and it's like he's trying to make SportsCenter's top 10 every single time he throws the ball. And there's some of that that's going to translate to the NFL. But when I look at it, about 60-ish% of like some of those spectacular plays you see in college aren't going to translate to the NFL because you're looking at different athletes on the field. You're looking at different levels of spacing, and pass rushers are going to be so much better than what you see in college. Like the best pass rusher he's seen in college is probably Jonah Ellis from Utah. If Ellis were to come into the NFL right now, he'd probably be like the 50th best pass rusher at best. So you've got about 50 guys better than him. And you'll probably see at least one or two of those guys every single week. So you have just different levels of talent, and Williams needs to thrive in structure. He needs to figure that out. And I mentioned about it with Mahomes earlier. Mahomes figured it out. He also had Andy Reid and a year to really groom and develop. You go number one overall, you don't get that. You don't have that kind of luxury. You don't have an incumbent that just went 13-3 on your roster that's going to help you learn, develop, and figure these things out over the course of time. That's not how that works. So you look at all these little nuances with his game. he needs to figure out how to take it basically, for lack of better terms, take a 3 to 5 step drop, hit a 10-yard dig route, and be comfortable taking a 10 to 15-yard gain instead of scrambling from a clean pocket and trying to create, because that's going to get you killed in the NFL. I don't know that he can do it. I also don't know that he can't, but it's a concern, the fact that he's not doing it. One of the reasons why I have Drake Maye over him, Drake Maye dominates from inside the pocket, and he's very good outside of structure. He's not Caleb Williams good, but he is more than capable to do everything that Williams does. Scramble from a dirty pocket, throw the ball down the field on the move with accuracy and velocity. Like, he can do all those things. And he dominates from inside the pocket, making real progressions. And I just don't see that from Williams. And I've heard a criticism of Lincoln Riley where, like, somebody called him Kyler Murray 2.0, where, and I kind of understand it, because Lincoln Riley doesn't really care about building you for the NFL. He cares about winning games in college football. Well, against the best defense he's faced during his time at USC, Caleb Williams is 0-3 against Utah. And some of that's on him. Some of that is on Alex Grinch and his absolutely abhorrent defenses. But he's 17-3 against the rest of college football. What can we read into that? Well, when he plays like an NFL caliber like defense, as far as like structure, scheme, and they have a lot of NFL caliber players, he struggles. And he shouldn't be struggling. He should be able to do a lot more. And to me, I can't get on board with, like, he's a Camus prospect. I see people like, if you think Caleb Williams is bad, you should try watching a different sport. Like, Caleb Williams isn't bad, but there are genuine issues, and I think they're getting overlooked because of how special some of the other things that he has about him. Mm-hmm. And that's why Drake Maye is my number one, because Williams has way too many question marks about some of the basic core elements you need to succeed at quarterback. If he figures that out, Caleb Williams has a legit chance to be the best quarterback that ever plays football because of everything that makes him special. But if you can't get the basics down, there's going to be a ceiling on what you're going to be able to do in the National Football League. And to me, that's scary.
So we should have brought this up when maybe Miles was talking about JJ McCarthy, but what about the potential Harbaugh-Kwesi connection there? Obviously, there's a past relationship there. Harbaugh interviewed for this job, maybe almost potentially left Michigan to coach the Vikings, but now JJ McCarthy's obviously the quarterback there. So I guess, Miles, what type of relationships that are in play there with Kwesi and Harbaugh? You know, do you think that there has been dialogue that's already been discussed, and do you think that makes it a kind of an easier bridge? And I guess the third layer to this question is, do you trust Kwesi and Harbaugh working together to pick the next Vikings quarterback too?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing you'll get from like a relationship in that aspect is a little bit more honesty. Like, obviously these college coaches want to talk up their players. Now, some coaches are a little bit more honest about some of their players than others, but I think with Harbaugh and like a Kwesi relationship, I think what you'll get is truly who JJ McCarthy is behind the scenes, like what he's like in the meeting rooms, what he's like around his teammates, what he's like as a person outside of just the person playing football, like the player on the field. And I think those are some of the things that Kwesi might be able to unearth that sometimes you don't always get insight into. Like, I know they do a lot of work behind the scenes to get some of those answers the best they can. Like, I think Draft Day, like the movie, they love to give you that, like going to the birthday party stuff. But like that shit kind of in some degree, some of that stuff does matter, at least to teams. And so I think Kwesi should, like, with that relationship, should hopefully be able to get a little bit more of that honesty and information from that than maybe he might be able to from other teams, like a Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley situation. Maybe he's not able to get as much information because of that, because he's who Caleb Williams is garnered to be Drake Maye as well. Like, so I'm hoping like that relationship can just help give you more information. I think there's a similar situation. I'm trying to look back at like the team where they had a really Kevin O'Connell with Will Levis. I think there was a lot of information last year. Kevin O'Connell had a lot of background info on him because of Kentucky's. Thank you, Liam Cohen, the offensive coordinator for the Rams and now Kentucky again. Like, a lot of information. Kevin O'Connell had a chance to draft Will Levis and didn't. And then that's not to say Kevin O'Connell liked Will Levis or didn't like Will Levis only because of the relationships. But I think you have a lot of that background information. You can garner a little bit more of like where you think a guy could be at transitioning to the next level because of the relationships you have. So I think there's something that's garnered there. Now, it doesn't mean that Kwesi's going to like, or Kevin O'Connell's going to like him more or less. But I think it just gives you more information to gather as you build out your big board and things like that in your rankings of quarterbacks.
Some more feedback questions here we got in Purple Daily on Draft I want to get to. Connor sent this one over the weekend and said, what do you guys think of Tyler Van Dyke? And I brought this name up to both of you in the pre-show, and you both kind of scoffed a little bit. Forno, I'll start with you.
Forno especially.
He scoffed at that pretty quickly. What do you think of Tyler Van Dyke?
He stinks. He's bad, especially when you look at the confines of what the offense is. He doesn't have necessarily the strongest arm in the world. He doesn't have really good pocket presence either, and he takes some really bad sacks, and he throws up some just like, remember Case Keenum, where Keenum would just have that bozo gene where he would just throw up like one or two just absolutely cherry-picked interceptions for the other team, like each game. Van Dyke does that too. And I just don't see any kind of really projectable outlook with Van Dyke. And a lot of his draft hype has really come from that freshman season, which is we are now 2 years removed from, where he looked great. He looked like, hey, maybe this guy can be the guy and he can take things to the next level. Well, then he is absolutely crap last year. And he's been fine this year, but fine college quarterback does not necessarily equate anything to NFL success. How being a great college quarterback doesn't equate to NFL success. Bailey Zappi was the best college football quarterback in 2021, 4th round pick of the Patriots. He's now on their practice squad. So to me, Van Dyke is an absolute no, and he would have to do a lot to change my mind.
Yeah, I would guess he's far down the pecking order. I love all the lists that we get here from fans. So if there's anyone else that's, whether it's someone that's a household name, maybe not a household name. I mean, did a lot of people know who Brock Purdy was even going into the 2022 draft for sure. So there's plenty of options too. So if you guys want us to talk any quarterback, please feel free to shoot us a note either on the YouTube comment section or in the Score North app. Fellas, I know we're not going to talk much of the 49ers game, but let's talk a little bit here about Andrew Booth, who seems to be getting another crack after kind of being an afterthought after his rookie season where he battled injuries. Now he's getting another shot, and Brian Flores even credits him in a post-game press conference last week, and looks like he's probably going to get some significant playing time against the 49ers. I guess, Miles, what do you want to see from Andrew Booth that he wasn't able to do in his rookie season, and is there a chance for him to kind of salvage some of the prospect or the draft stink that was on him after a rough rookie year? Do you see him being able to rebound here in the second half of 2023?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the perfect time for him to kind of dispel all of that, like, bad taste, bad pick, conversations that have been out there, and they were rightfully so. I think he's done a good job of, like, behind the scenes, just kind of like working himself back. I think it's something you'd like to see from like a Lewis Cine or from some other guys that aren't getting run, is just like, how are they doing in practice? How are they doing in meeting rooms? And clearly Andrew Booth's doing enough to warrant playing time over Mekhi Blackman last week. And we know that Blackman going into the season was pretty high regarded. So I think that's just good news. I mean, it doesn't mean it's going to completely turn around his career, but I mean, if he's going to do it, it's now. And I think that opportunity is really big for him. And I think he's got the ability. We've always known like the talent's there, but can he kind of put it together? And so my hope is with these opportunities is he's really going to be able to develop the rapport with his teammates, but also the trust from the coaches, but also just the confidence level. And cornerback is all about confidence. It's about playing with confidence and playing with that. Like, I think going into the season or going in his like NFL career, one thing I never had question about Andrew Booth was like confidence. Like, you could tell when you watched him, that dude played with a lot of confidence and played with a lot of like energy. I want to see that. I want to see that tonight. Like, I really want to see just like how he can come out and just kind of play a little bit more of that swagger that you're looking for from a cornerback, and make some plays and kind of talk some mess. Like, I love that. I've always been into like, I like guys talking. Like, I think it's fun. Not everybody's into that, but I'm into that. But I think I just want to see that, like, is that energy, the confidence. I think it's just going to go a long way for him. And I think he's the type of guy that has the ability to kind of maybe being a shutdown corner is maybe a little bit, we're kind of beyond that. But I think being a good quality NFL cornerback is very much in sights.
Forno, what does this mean for Kwesi, I guess, if he ends up actually maybe being right on Andrew Booth, who some people project as a first-round pick, but injuries kind of ruined his stock. He goes to the second round. And then Vikings fans kind of rag on Kwesi for obviously the Lewis Cine pick and the Booth pick on consecutive first two picks, and as a general manager are looking like complete busts. But now Booth's getting another crack. What would it do for the perception of Kwesi? Does his stock go back up a little bit more if Andrew Booth ends up being a pretty decent player in Flores' system? I guess if Booth ends up working out, what does it mean? And how do people kind of perceive Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah differently?
Listen, gentlemen, it's time for a victory lap, and I'm taking one right now. I've said for months, you have to give these guys time, and you have to give a draft class upwards of 3 years to really see what these guys are going to do. Injuries and just growth and development were two things that Andrew Booth Jr. needed to deal with. And he had the minor injury last year, had the torn meniscus, and now he came back and he's worked really hard in practice and he's earned that opportunity and he played well against the Bears. Sometimes guys just need time. And it's okay that a second round pick who's dealt with injuries needed some time to develop. And you have to give these guys time, and panicking and saying fire Kwesi and he's not any good at his job. It's too much hyperbole, and you need to give these players time to really figure out what's going on and get that growth and development curve under control. And Booth is figuring it out, and hopefully seen, even though he dealt with the hamstring injury for the last few weeks, hopefully he can get there too. And I'm not closing the book on either of these guys because you just need time. It's an inconclusive data set. Once we have more of a conclusive data set, then you can call them a bust. Right now it's too early, and this is why.
Hey, that 22 class in general, not seen, but like if Booth can continue that trend, Caleb Evans has been solid all year. Ed Ingram looks like he's figuring it out. If those three guys, like at least those three guys can hit, like I know people talk about historically bad, but like if those guys can those are important positions you need to keep filled, especially at cornerback. If those guys can kind of become staples, that just goes a long way for where this team is trying to go. And I think if we could see a little bit more of Asamoah, he's the other one for me that like maybe he could crack, because it looks like he played a little bit more last week. Or Ivan Pace has kind of been in and out of the lineup. I know Jordan Hicks has been playing out of his mind, so it's been him. But like maybe we see more of Asamoah, who's seen more snaps. So I think that maybe that 2022 class can salvage itself.
So with the 49ers obviously in town, I know we'll probably talk about this on next week's show. In fact, we'll have 2 games. The Vikings will have 2 games under their belt by the time we record next Monday. So if they do lose the 49ers, they're favored to lose. I mean, Vikings are big kind of home dogs here, but if they do indeed lose to the Niners, and then they play also a very lowly Packers team, does this change anything? Does tonight's result change anything? I guess if they maybe steal a win, does it change how they handle the trade deadline? Did this ownership and the general manager, Kwesi, basically just say, hey, we're actually going to push forward here? I mean, I guess how much does tonight's result kind of weigh on what this team wants to do by the trade deadline for now?
It weighs a lot. And if the Vikings win, 3-4 is a hell of a lot different than 2-5. Going into this week, they were a game out of the wild card. And if you win this game, you're going to feel a lot more comfortable potentially getting that wild card spot. And then you have the Packers, who I don't know if you watched the game against the Broncos. That team looks like a disaster. And they were dealing with some injuries on the defensive side of the football. Jordan Love isn't it. And I feel pretty comfortable saying that after he's played 6 games. And they have so much.
Wait a minute. Didn't you just say you need a bigger sample size though? Right? We need a bigger sample size.
To me, the difference is this: Jordan, even though this is his first year starting, Jordan Love's also in his 4th year. So like sometimes you can just see little things. He doesn't trust himself. And
I'm just giving you a hard time too, more than anything.
Fair. That's fair. I deserve a hard time here every now and then. But I'm out on Love. And if the Vikings somehow end up 4-4, I don't know how you can look ownership in the eye and said, hey, we need to sell. If it's 2-6, it's like, look, we really tried this season. We're looking forward to next season now. We're not going to fully give up on this year, but let's try and get some assets back for guys who are not going to be here in our plans in the future. And I think this game has a lot to do with it. But if they lose to the Packers too, and it's 2-6, I think that's when you're actually going to see some movement at the deadline, because 3-5 is still, I think, like from a front office perspective, there's 9 games left. It's too close to call, and we've been playing good football. So I think these games really do mean a lot.
It's pretty wild, too. I brought this up with Mackie and Judd. The fact the Vikings have not won a home game since last December. I believe the first time the Giants were here, right? I think that was their last home win. They lost, obviously, the couple weeks later to the Giants in the playoffs. They've lost their first, 3 games at home here today, this season. So now here they are, potentially still almost a full year removed from even winning a home game. And the Wilfs, who love stability and love business, they want to keep fans in the seats. And I agreed with Mackey on this point that I think regardless, Vikings fans are going to show up. It's the NFL. Like, they're not Jacksonville, where they have to play in London every year because their fan base is so weird, or it's not a Chargers game where it's half of the other team. But in general, I think this game means so much because if they kind of realize, we are far behind the 8 ball, we're getting good offers onto Danielle Hunter, or more calls start to come in on Danielle Hunter after this game, it's just such an interesting turning point, I guess, potentially for this season. Yeah, you could win the next 2, and by next week's show, we're talking about the Vikings being 4-4, and now all of a sudden they're back in the division somehow because the NFC North.
Do they become buyers? Do they become buyers in that situation?
Exactly.
Are we completely pivoting this conversation to like, oh, who should the Vikings go after?
Oh my gosh!
After yesterday's post-game presser where he had an expletive-laden rant, Jonathan Allen's an intriguing option. He could absolutely change the defensive line immediately.
It's too bad because, when we started this show, and obviously we were hoping the Vikings were going to have a better season, I would have much preferred to be talking about buying options than selling options. I think a lot of people think Purple Daily is this negative show and we only want to sell. No. I'd be all in on buying options, but they've kind of dug a deep enough grave here where it's kind of buying is probably now completely off the table, even if you win, I think, the next 2 games. Who knows? We'll see what happens. But yeah, it's going to be a wild next week by next timeline by next week's show here on Purple Daily on Draft, just because there'll be 2 games under the belt. And we'll have obviously a little bit of clarity on what the Vikings want to do on the eve of the NFL trade deadline as well. Any last things, boys, before we sign off here and talk again next Monday?
I'm
let's
excited.
See if they can figure it out.
Tuesday Night Football. Austin Reed in Western Kentucky play the Liberty Flames. High recommend you seek that game out. It's going to be high scoring. It's going to be a lot of fun. And there's nothing quite like midweek college football.
Love it. Hit the subscribe button. Daily Minnesota Vikings Entertainment. This is Purple Daily on Draft for Tyler Fornes, Miles Gorham, Declan Goff here. Hit the subscribe button for Daily Vikings Entertainment. Vikings Vent Line on Monday evening, late after Vikings 49ers. We'll be talking at you then.